Thank you for joining the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Northwestern Division for our Missouri River Water Management Conference call for the month of March 2017. We will be hosting monthly calls through early July. However, we'll be holding our spring public meetings in April across the Missouri Basin, and we'll provide the April update during that time. The next call will be held Friday, May 5th at 1 p.m. Central. If basin conditions warrant an ad hoc call due to an unexpected change, we will notify the region of an additional call. These calls are provided as a courtesy to congressional representatives, tribal and governmental officials, and the media. I am Eileen Williamson, and I will be moderating today's call. I just went through the location of the presentation materials via webinar. I'll repeat that. It's www.webmeeting.att.com. The number is 888-204-5984. The webinar code is 305-2336 with a security code of 0317. The calls are recorded and placed on the Defense Video and Imagery Distribution System at www.dvidsHUB.net/unit/USACE-NWD, and on iTunes you can search for Missouri River Basin. Your participation in today's call acknowledges your consent to be recorded. All lines will be placed on mute during this call, and to unmute your line or ask a question, please press *6. The forced mute function does not work on all phones, so if I ask, please use your phone's own mute function to avoid interrupting the call. Do not place it on hold. For the convenience of our media representatives, the final slide in the presentation includes each speaker's name, title, and contact information. The agenda and presenters for today's call are Doug Cluck from NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information, Kevin Lau from the National Weather Service's Missouri Basin River Forecast Center, Ms. Jody Farhat, Chief of the Army Corps of Engineers Missouri River Basin Water Management Division. But first, we have our Commander, Major General Scott Spellman. Sir?
Yeah, thanks, Eileen, and thanks to everyone for joining us again today for our water management update on the Missouri River Basin. We appreciate and look forward to continue to work with you as this runoff season unfolds. Really just one point for today. Our water management section continues to monitor the basin conditions, including the plain snow melt, the mountain snowpack, and certainly the spring rainfall, and they will adjust our reservoir operations accordingly. And today, intends to provide you another update of where we are at this point in time and our forecast for the weeks ahead. So I appreciate the outreach from everyone in Omaha, and thanks again for everyone's participation. And Eileen, thanks. Back to you.
All right, I'll hand it to you, Doug.
All right. Well, thanks, Eileen. Thanks to the Corps, and thanks to everybody on the call today. Can you hear me all?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to switch to the first slide, conditions over the last 30 days. And what you'll see there is a rather remarkable warmth over most of the basin, especially over the lower basin and portions of South Dakota, where temperatures were 6 to 10 degrees above normal for mainly the month of February and the early part of March. That has led to quite a bit of snow melt, and we'll talk about that more, and others will probably talk about that more across the plains. The other map in the lower right is the percent of normal precipitation over the last 30 days, and you'll see mostly that the basin, for the most part, the basin has been drier than normal, with some areas that got some heavier snows actually in some of the higher elevations, as well as a swath across northern Nebraska. Next slide. Next slide are conditions since January 1st of this year. Departure from normal temperatures. Again, basically the lower basin through Colorado and actually all the way up into the eastern part of the basin were relatively well above normal, with an area in Montana, northern Wyoming, western Dakotas that were slightly below to near normal in terms of temperature. And then you look at the precipitation map, it is similar to the one we just looked at, except that, of course, obviously it has January, February, and a portion of March in it. And it shows that swath of heavier precipitation across northern Nebraska into Wyoming, and actually most of Wyoming shows, and western Montana show above normal precipitation. Most of North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, eastern Colorado, and Missouri show below normal in terms of precipitation so far this year. Next slide. These are the percent of normal of snow water equivalent. That's if you melt all the snow down. This is the amount of water that's left in the snowpack in some of these upper basins. Now, most of what you should be looking at is sort of the portions of Montana that feed the Missouri Basin, and you'll see a lot of 100s, 81, 80s to 100 in there. So nothing sort of phenomenal. As you go a little bit further south into Wyoming, you will see some numbers that are fairly large, and up to 200, a little over 200% of normal. And then on the map on the right, I just want to point out this map was a month ago, and of course I had to make it smaller. But as you'll see that. Some of those drier basins in the upper part of the Missouri Basin, especially in Montana, actually showed an increase in the amount of snow water equivalent. It's slight. It's nothing phenomenal, but it does show an increase in the amount of snowpack. Next slide. Next slide is the Plains snowpack as of yesterday, and you'll see there that while there is snow across an extensive area, it's very light for the most part over the plains. The only portions of heavier plains snow, not at elevation, are around Bismarck again, where the heavier snow fell earlier this winter. A lot of this snow has retreated due to much warmer than normal conditions, especially up around that area. So the snow has been coming off in a relatively responsible manner as far as the flooding people are concerned. People who worry about flood, I should say. Next slide. This is an outlook for a week or two, 2 weeks from now, basically March 14th to the 20th. It basically shows that the lower part of the basin has enhanced chances for above normal temperatures. The northern part of the basin, let's say Montana, North Dakota, have a slightly better chances for below normal temperatures during that week. And then down in the precipitation map to the lower right shows that there are enhanced chances for above normal precipitation during this week. Mainly in the northern and eastern parts of the basin. Now, those aren't strong probabilities, but it certainly is more than normally would be there. So we go to the next slide, and this is a sort of a view of what March, the outlook for March is, and really, other than maybe the uppermost basins in Montana, we really see that there is either warmer than normal conditions. Better chances for warmer than normal conditions over much of the basin, except for maybe a very small portion of Montana where there's a slight bit of below, and then there's equal chances across North Dakota and northern Wyoming and Montana. And then if we look over at the precipitation chances for the month of March, we see that there's this below normal wedge, if you calling it, from the southwestern part of the basin through Colorado into Nebraska and pushing into Missouri. So chances of precipitation being below normal are higher in that region, and then a very light green, so probabilities are enhanced, but only slightly for above normal precipitation across Montana and North Dakota in the other. Up to the northern part of the basin. If we go to the next slide, the 3-month temperature and precipitation probability outlooks for April, May, and June, we see, again, that the lower part of the basin has better than normal chances for above normal temperatures during this time period, over this 3-month period. But we also see, looking at the precipitation map, that there are enhanced probabilities, again slight, for above normal precipitation across Montana, and mainly Montana and maybe western North Dakota for the most part, as far as this basin is concerned. Next slide. I threw a few extra maps in here. There is some concern in the southern part of the basin with drought increasing in terms of aerial coverage anyway. The map up in the upper left corner is the current situation as far as the drought monitor is concerned. That's more of a blow up of what's on the map below it, the U.S. drought monitor, just for the Missouri Basin. And you'll see that Missouri, ports of South Dakota, Kansas, eastern Colorado, and Nebraska all have some degree of drought activity, if you will, going on at the moment. If you look at the lower right map, you'll see where it's yellow. That is looking out about a month and looking at where drought conditions could get a little bit worse. Excuse me. And then the map above that is sort of the change over the last month on where conditions have gotten better or for worse. And if you have to look pretty closely because the shading is a little drowned out there. But where it's green, you see conditions have improved, and where you see it's yellow, conditions have deteriorated in terms of drought. Okay? Next slide are sort of the key points from all of this. Current El Nino Southern Oscillation, that's what ENSO stands for, or El Nino La Nina. Current conditions are neutral, so it's neither one way or the other. There's a lot of speculation out there in terms of later this year and where that's going to go. I don't want to speculate because I think it just is speculation at this point. I'll talk to you in about 2 or 3 months and have a much better handle on which way we go, whether El Nino, La Nina, or near neutral for the rest of the year. Plain snowpack, you see a few local 2 to 4 inch water equivalents, mainly in North Dakota, much reduced from last month, the plain snowpack. You see the mountain snowpack above normal in the southern Rockies still, and then you see near normal to slightly above normal in the north. And then very warm temperatures over the basin last 30 days for sure. This winter has been a relatively warm, depending on where you are in the basin, it's been a relatively warm winter, except in the northwest. Mainly dry plains in terms of precipitation, mainly dry in the plains with a few areas of elevated precipitation over the last 30 days. Looking out, the prediction part of this, I just talked about this, neutral El Nino, La Nina for the next 3 months. Weak signs pointing towards El Nino, but really it's too early to call. Temperatures enhance cool tendencies to the north and west in the short term, transitions to equal chances more or less in the spring. Most of the basin remains with enhanced chances for above normal temperatures for the spring and even March. So that's where we're leaning. And then as far as precipitation, leaning wet in the northern basin. Short term, it's, in other words, through March, and also April, May, and June. I guess I put that in the southern basin. Enhanced chances for drier than normal conditions through March, then equal chances through the spring. Drought, some minor worsening of drought in lower basin already on the ground and predicted to increase a little bit. And I do believe that is my last slide. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Doug. Kevin, you out there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for asking the National Weather Service to participate. I'm Kevin Lau, and I'll be giving the National Weather Service flood potential brief this afternoon. So as Doug had already alluded to, snowpack conditions in the mountains vary. The upper Missouri above Fort Peck is near average with respect to snowpack, with the Yellowstone, North, and South Platte headwater snowpacks being above average. By this point in the winter, we have normally accumulated about 80% of the seasonal peak snow water equivalent. The March water supply forecast issued by both the Natural Resources Conservation Service as well as the National Weather Service should be issued later this week. Preliminary March numbers suggest near average mountain runoff volume for the Missouri River above Fort Peck and slightly above average volumes for both the Yellowstone and North Platte basins. Normal to below normal runoff volume is expected in the South Platte. Unseasonably warm February temperatures, as Doug has already alluded to, have eroded most of the plains and snowpack in the Dakotas, with lower than expected runoff occurring as a result. There was some high water along the White River in South Dakota, but that was due to ice action. And in the James River Basin in South Dakota, we had some high water due to the February snowmelt. There's widespread but very shallow plain snowpack left in Montana and Wyoming. Snowpack in South Dakota is limited to the Black Hills, where the highest estimates are about 4 inches of snow water equivalent. There does remain some snow in North Dakota, with the highest liquid equivalent estimates in the 3-inch range in the headwaters of the James. Elsewhere in the Missouri Basin, plain snowpack is non-existent. The National Weather Service issued a spring flood outlook for the basin last week. And although significant widespread flooding is not expected due to mountain snowpack melt alone this spring, long-range river outlooks do indicate the possibility of minor flooding along some of the tributaries of Montana, including the Sun River, Clear Creek, and Clark's Fork Yellowstone. Minor to possibly moderate flooding is also possible in the Wind River Basin in Wyoming. Long-range river outlooks also suggest the possibility of tributary flooding this spring in the plains. Rivers likely to experience springtime flooding include the Cannonball and Little Muddy rivers in North Dakota, the James River in North and South Dakota, and the White and Big Sioux rivers in South Dakota. In Nebraska, flooding is possible along the lower reach of the North Platte and along some of the smaller tributaries in the eastern portion of the state, such as Salt Creek. In Iowa, flooding is possible in the Big and Little Sioux basins and along the Floyd. And although we do have abnormally dry conditions in Missouri and eastern Kansas, as Doug mentioned, convection drives springtime flooding in this area, and we do expect flooding along some of the tributaries to the Missouri River in eastern Kansas and Missouri, including the Grand, Sheraton, Osage, Big Blue, and the Platte River in Missouri. Again, tributary flooding in the lower third of the basin due to thunderstorm activity is typical. Thank you, and this concludes the National Weather Service Flood Potential Brief.
Thank you, Kevin. And Jody, to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the call today. We appreciate your participation and look forward to our continued collaboration. Following the 2011 flood, the Corps' Northwestern Division committed to better communication with the congressional delegations, states, tribes, and stakeholders, and this call is part of that effort. Real-time regulation of the reservoir system is done using the best available hydrologic and climatic information and is adjusted to respond to changing conditions on the ground. Each month, and more frequently if needed, we produce updated runoff and reservoir regulation forecasts. Late last week, we posted the March runoff and reservoir regulation forecast on our webpage, and earlier today we put out a press release covering much of the same information that we're covering on the call today. So now I'll ask two of the senior engineers in my office to describe these forecasts in more detail. We'll begin with Nicole Shorney, who will discuss the updated 2017 runoff forecast. She'll be followed by Joel Konopchinsky, who will discuss the planned regulation of the reservoir system based on the current runoff forecast. So Nicole?
Thanks, Jody. Hello, everyone. The 2017 calendar year runoff forecast for the upper Missouri Basin above Sioux City, Iowa, updated on March 1st, is 29.1 million acre-feet, which is 115% of average. The runoff forecast considers recent runoff trends, plains and mountain snowpack, drought and soil moisture conditions, and the NOAA Climate Prediction Center's monthly and seasonal temperature and precipitation outlooks. As seen on slide 16, runoff in the Missouri River Basin comes from three components: plains snowmelt, mountain snowmelt, and rainfall runoff. Typically, plains snowmelt runoff occurs in March and April. This year, however, most of the plains snowpack melted in February. As seen on the top image of slide 17, the National Weather Service's National Operational Hydrologic Remote Sensing Center, or NORISC, modeled snow assessment currently indicates the heaviest snow liquid content range from 2 to 4 inches in some localized areas of central North Dakota, although the heaviest amounts are outside the Missouri River Basin. Some areas of central Montana and north central Wyoming also have remaining plain snow that has less than an inch of liquid content. The rest of the upper basin has no plain snow remaining. Compared to this time in 2011, which is shown in the bottom image, there is significantly less plain snowpack remaining this year. Slide 18 shows the mountain snowpack was 98% of average in the reach above Fort Peck and 131% of average in the reach between Fort Peck and Garrison, primarily the Yellowstone Basin, as of March 6, 2017. The snowpack in the reach above Fort Peck is well below where it was at this time of year in 1997 and 2011. The snowpack in the Fort Peck to Garrison reach is very comparable to where it was at this time of year in 2011, but less than it was in 1997 and still well below where the snowpack ultimately peaked in either year. Normally, 79% of the eventual peak snowpack is accumulated by March 1st. The mountain snowpack normally peaks in mid-April. Slide 19 shows our 2017 calendar year runoff forecast updated on March 1st. February runoff was more than double its average. This was due to plain snowmelt from much warmer than normal February temperatures. So, focusing on the March to July runoff season, the time when we see our highest runoff, we're expecting March runoff to be slightly above average for the upper basin as the remainder of the plain snowpack enters the system. April runoff into Fort Peck and Garrison is forecasted to be slightly above normal due to the possibility of early mountain snowmelt from forecasted warmer than normal temperatures. As Doug mentioned, ENSO-neutral conditions are forecasted for this spring. That means that our forecast for May through July runoff in the Fort Peck and Garrison reaches, the two reaches that are affected by mountain snowpack, is mostly influenced by the average mountain snowpack above Fort Peck and the above average mountain snowpack from Fort Peck to Garrison, as well as the above normal precipitation outlook for Montana and the current high soil moisture content. For the Oahe to Sioux City reaches, we're forecasting normal runoff for the April to July period. In summary, our annual runoff forecast is 29.1 million acre feet, or 115% of normal. Joel will now discuss the March Reservoir System regulation studies.
Thank you, Nicole. On December 18th, the reservoir system storage reached 56.1 million acre feet, which is at the base of the annual flood control zone. This means that all the stored 2016 floodwaters have been evacuated from the system. Currently, the system storage is at 57.2 million acre feet, or 1.1 million acre feet into the 16.3 million acre feet of available flood storage. Releases from Gavin's Point are currently 17,000 cubic feet per second. Releases will be stepped up beginning at or around March 19th to provide flow support for the 2017 navigation season. The navigation season will open on April 1st at the mouth near St. Louis. Moving on to the monthly studies, the basic simulation uses the runoff forecast that Nicole just discussed. Due to the amount of variability in precipitation and other hydrologic factors that can occur over the next several months, we also develop an upper and lower runoff that are then used in the upper and lower basic simulations. These simulations provide a range of reservoir elevations and releases that may be expected under the different runoff scenarios. The discussion to follow will focus on the basic, or most likely runoff forecast. Information on the other runoff simulations is posted on our webpage. Next slide. Looking at the upper three reservoirs, under the most likely forecast, Fort Peck Reservoir is expected to peak near elevation 2240.4, or 6.4 feet into the 16-foot flood pool, which extends from elevation 2234 to 2250. Peak releases are expected to average about 11,000 cubic feet per second this summer. Garrison Reservoir is expected to peak near elevation 1846.8, or 9.3 feet into the 16.5-foot flood pool, which extends from elevation 1837.5 to 1854. Peak releases are expected to average about 30,000 cubic feet per second this summer. The Oahe Reservoir is expected to peak near elevation 1613.2, or 5.7 feet into the 12.5-foot flood pool, which extends from elevation 1607.5 to 1620. Peak releases are expected to average about 30,000 cubic feet per second. Next slide. Navigation service level and season length. The navigation service level is used to determine releases from the Gavin's Point Dam to support navigation and to help provide an 8 to 9 foot deep navigation channel downstream. The navigation service level at the start of the navigation season is based on the March 15th system storage. Since we are now within a few days of March 15th, it is likely that flow support for navigation will be full service. Flows for this level of service are designed to provide a 9-foot deep navigation channel, with Gavin's Point releases expected to range from the upper 20,000 to the lower 30,000 cubic feet per second this summer, depending on downstream conditions, and that those releases will be reduced in response to downstream flooding if necessary. However, the effectiveness of the reservoir system to reduce peak stages along the lower river diminishes as you move downstream due to the travel time. The surface level for the remainder of the navigation season and the navigation season length are based on the July 1 system storage. Under the basic forecast, flow support for navigation would be full service after the July 1st storage check, and a full 8 months navigation season would be provided. Energy generation at the main stem dams for 2017 under the basic simulation is 10.1 billion kilowatt hours, and this compares to the long-term average of approximately 9.3 billion kilowatt hours. Thank you, and this concludes my talk.
Okay, this is Jody again. So in summary, we began this year's runoff season with the full flood control capacity of the reservoir system available, and currently more than 93% of that capacity is remaining after capturing much of the plains snowmelt runoff. Plains snowmelt runoff, which typically enters the reservoir system in March and April, started early this year, and much of it has already been stored in the mainstem reservoirs. This water, along with runoff from the mountain snowmelt and rainfall, will be used throughout the remainder of the year to serve other authorized purposes, like navigation and water supply. However, there's still a month or more remaining in the snow accumulation season, so we'll continue to monitor the conditions in the basin and will make any necessary release adjustments as the spring unfolds. Flood control remains our primary consideration in 2017, and while the risk of significant widespread flooding due to mountain snow melt alone is not likely this year, minor flooding is expected in some of the mountain tributary basins, as you heard from Kevin Lau. In addition, there's always a risk of flooding due to spring and summer thunderstorms, particularly along the lower basin. The Corps' ability to significantly reduce flood risk along the lower Missouri Basin diminishes at locations further downstream, as Joel mentioned, due to that large uncontrolled drainage area and the travel time from Gavin's Point Dam. When possible, releases from the mainstem reservoirs will be adjusted to reduce the impacts of these events, and sufficient flood control capacity exists in the reservoir system this year to do that. As I did last month, I want to make sure that you're aware of the new products we have on our website. We're posting this each Tuesday. As shown here, it provides the highlights regarding the basin conditions, including the status of the upper three reservoirs, the overall system storage, and graphics depicting the current plains and mountain snowpacks. You'll also find links to our latest news release, the 3-week forecast, and both the plains and mountain snowpack comparisons to 2011. We hope you find this summary useful. If you have any suggestions for improvement, please let us know. And finally, I want to take this opportunity to invite each of you to attend our spring public meetings next month. The meetings will be held at the following dates and locations. On Tuesday, April 11th, we'll be at the Jerry Linton Visitor Center in Smithville, Missouri at 11 a.m. Later that day, we'll be at the Western Historic Trails Center in Council Bluffs at 5 p.m. Wednesday, April 12th, we'll be at the Fort Peck State Fish Hatchery. And for those of you in Montana, that is a change in location for where we've met the last couple of years. So the State Fish Hatchery in the same general location in Fort Peck, Montana. And we'll be at the Bismarck State College in Bismarck, North Dakota, later on Wednesday, April 12th. And finally, on Thursday, April 13th, we'll be at the Ramkota Inn in Pierre, South Dakota. We hope to see you all there. That concludes my remarks, and so I'll turn it back to you, Eileen, for the questions and answers.
All right, thanks, Jody. Remember, for the team to ask questions, please press *6 on your phone to come off mute. I'll field questions by state in alphabetical order, beginning with Iowa. Are there any members of the congressional delegations on the call? Tribes? State officials or local government? Members of the press? For the state of Kansas? Congressional members? Tribes? State or local government officials? Members of the press? Again, *6 if you have a question. For the state of Missouri, congressional members? Tribes? State or local government officials? Members of the press? For the state of Montana, congressional members? Tribes? State or local government officials? Members of the press? All right, again, I remind you, *6 to come off mute. Moving to the state of Nebraska. Members of the congressional delegation? Tribes? State officials or local government? Members of the press? For the state of North Dakota, congressional delegation members? Tribes? State or local government officials? Members of the press? State of South Dakota, congressional delegation members? Tribes? State or local government officials?
This is Andrew with Congresswoman Christine Elm's office.
Yeah.
And just had a question. I'm not sure if I missed it in the presentation, but have you put out a statistic or data point on the amount of storage at this point, the March storage check in 2011 compared to today?
This is Jody. I have that information available. As of this date in 2011, system storage was about 500,000 acre-feet higher than we're seeing today. And I think most importantly, during 2011, during the month of March, we gained over 4 million acre-feet from that heavy plain snowmelt that hadn't come into the reservoir system yet back in 2011. This year, most of that runoff has already entered the reservoir system, and based on our forecast, we're expecting to gain just about 1.3 million acre-feet this month under our basic runoff forecast, and about 2.5 million acre-feet if we go as far as our upper basic forecast. So.
Okay. So just to characterize this, we're about at the same level of storage that we were in 11, but you believe that the amount or the plain snowpack has melted in earlier, so that's incorporated in that?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
We will still get some additional plain snowmelt because some of it's still in the ditches and coming in, and a little bit of colder weather has slowed some of that down, but we think we have the bulk of it in now. Thank you. Good question.
Any other questions from the state of South Dakota, government, press, tribes, or otherwise?
This is Jerry Oster, WNAX in Yankton.
Okay.
First of all, could we get a spelling of Nicole and Joe's names, please?
They'll actually be on the slides at the end of the presentation. Do you have the slides?
Yeah, I'm on. Okay, there. Okay, great. Thanks. And then the question I have probably for Jody and crew is, we all refer back to 2011, and there was, the snow melt and the rain upstream. At this point, not knowing what snow we're going to see in March, if we get to a rain event, how big a rain event would cause concern? Is it, a 2-inch, a 4-inch, a 6-inch kind of rain? What would raise your concern?
I don't have any specific analysis that would tell me that. What I can tell you, though, is if you look at those three factors of runoff, plain snowpack, mountain snowpack, and rainfall, this year, we have half of the mountain snowpack. We have it in the Garrison Reach, but not in the Peck Reach. The plain snowpack, it was heavy, but it melted early. A lot of it soaked in the ground. So we did not get as much runoff off that as we had anticipated. And then we had not just rain, but record rains in Montana and parts of Wyoming in 2011. And so, those rains that we had in 2011 were, for the month on the order of, 10 to 15 or 20 inches in some areas up there. So, and certainly no one's predicting that. So I think, based on what we see today, the reservoir system is in good shape, and it would take something much, much larger than the 2011 flood event to end up with a flood like we had that year. I don't know, Kevin Lau, if you guys do any type of analysis, but I guess, that's really looking at system storage, and I think we have system storage available this year.
Yeah, I don't have that sort of information either, Jody.
Okay.
I just, for most of the basin, we are statistically near normal for runoff production. We have some areas, like I mentioned earlier, like in the Sun in Montana, that have a little higher. You look at Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, they're 10 to 20% lower because of the soil. So, it would depend on where the rain was, but I would agree with you, it would take what we saw in 11 to put us back into 11 situation. More than 11, in fact, as you said.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. We seem to get 100-year floods like every other year anymore.
Yeah, we understand.
Yeah. And again, 100-year flood is 1% annual chance, not 1 in 100 years.
Yeah. Like, we seem to get them, like every other year, or 100-year rain.
Right.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the state of South Dakota? All right. Moving to Wyoming. Members of the congressional delegation, tribes, state or local government officials, and members of the press. And do we have any national press? Any final questions or statements before we adjourn? Okay, as a reminder, Jody gave the time for the spring public meetings, and those public meetings will replace the monthly call. If there is a need for a call, we will notify the basin. However, the next call is scheduled for May 5th, Friday at 1 p.m. Central, and appreciate your participation today. Thank you.